Okay, so now that we're done with the Jumbotron right here, our next task is to code up these tiles over here. And these tiles are the menu, the specials, and the map. Now, it's worthwhile to take a look at how these tiles are supposed to behave when they're in a smaller device. So this is a view of the desktop view, basically. This is, I believe, the tablet view. And you could see it's basically just about the same. But then when we get to the mobile version, you see that what we want to do is to have the menu and the specials stay on top, but the map should basically slide down and now take up 2 spaces, so it will be nice and even between 2 of them. And finally, on the very last one, if we have it here, but we actually don't have it here listed, but obviously when it becomes super, super small, we want them all to just stack one upon the other. Menu, specials, and the map. Okay, so let's go to our code editor and see how we can accomplish it. So I'm looking right now at index.html, which is located in examples lecture 35, the after folder, and this is the index.html. Okay, so we still want it to be part of the main content, and this is our div for the main content that ends right here. And we want it to be just right under the Jumbotron, so we'll put it right about here. And since the whole main content is already a container, then I don't have to provide another container. Remember that every Bootstrap grid has to be inside of a container or an element that is marked with a container class. So I don't need to do that anymore, but I do need to define a row. So I'll go ahead and define my row. And there it is right here. And I'll even give it an ID. We'll call it home tiles, so it'll be easier for us later to style this, and have this kind of as a base. Okay, so let me copy and paste some of the code that I've pre-made for this lecture, and I'll go ahead and go over it afterwards. Let me close this div actually, right here, and we'll take a look at it. Okay, so again, we're inside the row, and now we want every class for the desktop. We'll concentrate on the desktop first. For the desktop, we want MD4, and again MD4, which means we're going to have they all add up to 12, which means every single one of them is going to take a third of the screen. And therefore, we're going to have these 3 tiles on MD. So at the medium screen and above, this will become a 3-tile type of layout. Moving on down, at the small level, meaning at the smaller screen size, so it's column small, the first 2 are column small 6. So they'll take up half the screen. And the third one, if you take a look, is 12. So when we're at the small screen size, the first 2 will take out half the screen each, and therefore we'll take 1 basically row. And the third tile will slide down kind of to the second row, even though it's not technically a Bootstrap second row, but it'll slide down and it will stretch the entire width of the grid. So therefore it will basically equal to the first 2 columns, because they're 6 and 6. And finally, at the smallest level, at the extra small screen, we want every single one of those things to stack one upon the other. And therefore, we're doing extra small 12. So now it's going to take up the entire width of the screen at the smallest screen size, which is probably going to be mobile. Okay, before we look at the browser, let's go ahead and take a look at the contents of each of these tiles that I'm kind of calling them tiles, at least in my mind they are. So each one of them is going to have a link, ahref, and the first one is going to point to menu categories. In other words, when the user is going to click on the menu item, which is what this is going to, or the menu tile, I should say, which is what this is going to be, I don't want to display the entire menu item by item to them. Instead, I want to display menu categories to them and then let them choose a menu category that will show them the menu items for that menu category. So the way that's broken up is we have a link that is surrounding a div, and the div has an ID menu tile. And inside that div, we have a span called menu. And the reason I'm breaking them out like that is because the div with an ID menu tile is going to be something we're actually going to size and make a particular like square rectangle looking thing. And the span, the menu span, we're actually going to position absolutely within the div of the menu tile. And since, if you remember, take a look at our design here, Let's go take a look at our design real quick. You can see that this is smack on the bottom right here, and I always want it to stay in the bottom. And the way we're going to achieve that is we're going to size this square right here and then make it relative, which means all its children can now be positioned absolutely, and we're going to be very easily positioning them right at the bottom without having to worry about this element's overall position on the screen. So it'll be absolute, but it'll be at the same time relative to the tile within which it's going to live. Okay, so that's that. And the second one is going to be exactly the same one. Is the second tile is going to just point to specials. So we're going to have a special category called specials and let people basically jump to that category straight away. And for now, we're going to make these separate pages. But as we build out the site, we might make a different decision as to how we're going to host these particular pages and present this information. The last style is going to be the map, and I purposefully left it out because I want to show you how I would embed a real map. But the structure of the thing is going to be about the same. We're going to still have an A element, and we're going to leave the href of it alone for now. And what we are going to do is we're going to define a target of underscore blank. And the reason we're going to define a target underscore blank is that if somebody clicks on this map, I don't want them to forget about our restaurant website. So it will automatically either open a new window or usually it'll just open a new tab. And this is kind of a controversial topic a little bit. I mean, I've seen some people say that that's not very nice for users to do, but overall, I think everybody agrees that the user is going to forget about your site if you willingly and easily take them to a different website and basically have no other way other than the back button to get back to your site. So it's probably easier just to open in a separate tab and let them look at the map, and the restaurant site is still going to be around, still open their browser, so they won't forget about it. Okay, so inside the A tag, I'm going to still have a div, and the div is going to, I will give it an ID so it'll be easier to select it later. I will say it map tile. So these ones are supposed to be home tiles. So each one is either ID menu tile, specials tile, or in this case is map tile. And if this site sold crocodiles, there'll be another one called reptile. I just had to do it. I couldn't hold myself back. Anyway, so this is the div within which the map is actually going to go. This is where it's going to live. And it's actually going to be an iframe, but I'll show you how I'm going to embed it in here. But one last thing we need to do in this div is that span element that is going to say map, and that's also going to be that part where it's going to say map right here, this little element span. Okay, let's save it and let's go ahead and take a look as to what it looks like in the browser. And just like I thought, there's really nothing much to it yet. We have some links here, but we really didn't style any of the actual tiles yet. We just have a bunch of links here showing up. Let's go back to the code editor and open up our styles.css, and we'll scroll down to the homepage area, which I should have somewhere here. Here's the homepage. Here's our Jumbotron. And let's make a couple of spaces here, and let's go ahead and style these tiles. I already wrote some styles for this, so let me go ahead and copy and paste a couple, and we'll go from there. So here is the styles for the sizing of them. So first of all, we're going to select every single one of them, and we'll put a comma in between so we can share the styles, because they're really supposed to look just about the same, or at least on the desktop browser, right? So first of all, I'm going to say that their height is going to be 250 pixels. Their width, each one, is going to be 100%. Well, I don't really mean 100% of the screen, obviously. I mean 100% of whatever their container element is going to be. And let's go ahead and take a look as to what the container element I'm talking about. So this is that div right here, and the div is sitting inside the anchor element, the A element, and that's sitting inside the div. Well, this is the div that is going to get sized by the Bootstrap grid system. So therefore, what I'm essentially saying is that I want this div that encompasses the label and the entire contents of it, I want it to be as wide as this grid will allow me to be, which is at the point where it's going to be a desktop browser, going to be a third of the web page. Okay, so let's go back to the styles.css and keep reading here. So margin bottom, I want the margin bottom to be 15 pixels. So this is more for when it starts sliding one underneath the other, and also to separate it a little bit from the footer that's going to come right below it. And this is the important part here. Well, all of them are important, but this is the positioning part. Position relative. So position relative, as you remember, will not actually move this tile anywhere, but it will set up something like an anchor for the rest of the child elements of whatever these IDs are. So now I'll basically be able to position them absolutely within this element. And I'll give it a nice border, and it's going to be a maroon solid border, 2 pixels. And overflow hidden, that's really there to clip anything that, we end up having to stick out a little bit. And for the most part, that's really going to be the map. I don't think the rest of the content is actually going to stick out because it's not going to be an iframe. We're actually going to size the other elements very exactly, but the iframe is a little bit harder to control. We also want to give a user some sort of indication when they position their mouse over these tiles that they're in fact about to select something. So we're really going to just provide a bit of a gray shadow around our border just to let the user know that they're about to select something if their mouse is over it. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's take a look as to what it looks like in the browser. And now it's starting to look a little bit better. So now I can actually roll my mouse over it and I can see that the border selects. There's obviously no content inside of it yet, but we'll go ahead and stop here for part 1 of this lecture. And in part 2, we're going to start filling out the content. We'll put the pictures in and start styling the labels of these tiles.